Hello, everybody. Welcome back into MLS Digest. I'm Camille, your host, and we're here to preview Week 11 of MLS action coming your way this weekend, May 3rd and 4th. And we also have a couple of midweek games going on before this weekend's action, the only two being two separate cups, one being the big one, of course, with Champions Cup, with Vancouver Whitecaps and Inter Miami playing. Whitecaps are up 2-0 heading into the second leg in Miami. A decent lead, but in Miami, anything can happen, as we saw when they came back against LAFC. But Whitecaps looking super, super dangerous right now at the same time. And also over in Canada, we have the Canadian Cup, the Canadian Championship, between the three MLS teams that are from Canada, and then also the Canadian Premier League and some other teams there, which is their own Canadian Cup. And in the first round of that, we have Toronto FC hosting Montreal. So two of the heavyweights in Canada per se, going up against each other in the first round, and one will be knocked out very, very early. So that's at the time of this recording, Wednesday. Both of those are going on, and we'll see what happens, but those are the only teams dealing with midweek action. Other than that, we, of course, have 15 games coming up this weekend for Week 11. Week 10 saw plenty of goals, and especially on Sunday, we had a bunch of banger games with just goals galore, a lot of fun, and that's a big part of why this expanded schedule was really a good idea, a good addition, and hopefully we continue to get a more spread out schedule so we can actually be able to watch most matches and each weekend. So we'll get into everything you need to know for Week 11 with injury news and roster decisions and updates, and of course add a couple of best bets in there. Before we get into all of that, please make sure to like the video down below and sub to the channel if you haven't already and are new and enjoy the MLS content. Let's just get into everything you need to know for Week 11. Saturday's slate starts off with Atlanta United back at home against Nashville, and Nashville putting up a whole touchdown with the extra point on the Fire, and a lot has to go right and a lot has to go wrong on both ends for something like that to happen. So a 7-2 win last time out for Nashville. It's going to be really hard to top that. That's the most goals scored by a team so far this season in MLS. It is Major League scoring, but that is still an insane number. I think we've seen 5 by a lot of teams, or a decent amount of teams. But 7 is going to be, even to match, is going to be pretty difficult for any team. And they get Atlanta on the road here. Atlanta in just abysmal form. 3 straight losses now, all without scoring, and back-to-back 3-0 losses. But they are back at home here, and that hasn't really been a fortress for them this season. And they also have some injury issues with Muyumba and Gregerson, both out for a couple of weeks. And that's a big loss for them, even though Derek Williams might come back on that back line in replacement potentially. Muyumba is a big part of that defensive midfield and just winning some duels. And for an Atlanta side that on the attacking end just hasn't been putting it together, this whole team just has been looking very, very lazy, very unfocused, unmotivated. And we have to wonder if that's completely on the coach or whatnot, and if this team is really playing for the coach at this moment. But for Nashville, I mean, it's not just really luck or anything like that for this team. They've been fully healthy now. The new midfielders have really transformed how much possession they have, what they actually do on the ball, and they're up into the top 3 in terms of their expected goals output by the numbers. So that output versus the Fire and some other recent, just scoring in general by them that we really didn't see last season, I don't think has been, purely luck. I mean, Surridge and Mukhtar and all those midfielders are really in sync right now, and it's hard not to take Nashville in this one. They're not favored by the odds. It's hard for a team to really get favored on the road in MLS, unless they're really been showing that they're an elite team consistently. And before that Fire result, Nashville's results were a little sketchy. They lost a couple of games late, including to Cincinnati and Charlotte. Zimmerman also still dealing with concussion protocol, so not really many updates on that, and that's a big part of their back line. Even though they scored 7 against the Fire, they let in 2. One was on a free kick, yes, but at the same time, it's hard for this Nashville team, it feels like, to really keep things and keep things very tight defensively and not allow goals even when they are scoring them without Zimmerman. And so it seems like he's not really trending still in the right direction. He was day-to-day entering the game against the Fire and then didn't play, but still no updates on him specifically. And I'm going to consider him out personally, but obviously have to monitor that situation with a couple of days to go. But I'm still going to take Nashville in this one. I think all the signs point to Atlanta. Just, I just don't think they're going to all turn it around and click in 1 week. So I'm going to favor Nashville to get this one done, something around 2-1. Moving on to Toronto and the Revs playing two of the East's teams under the playoff line, and two teams actually in different form. Toronto with just one win on the season, and New England was one of the worst teams through the first 5 weeks. But in the past 5 weeks, as you can see, 4 wins in those 5 games, including all wins in their last 3 games, with all as well coming with clean sheets. And Caleb Porter's team has preached a defensive first kind of mindset. And on attack, it's mostly been Carles Hill pulling the strings and getting in on the score sheet in terms of the goals or assists. And including last week where they defeated Charlotte on the road, which is obviously no easy feat for any team. And Toronto is one of those teams in midweek action facing Montreal in the first round of the Canadian Cup. And between those two teams, Toronto definitely has more players in terms of subs and second kind of squad players. So it seems like they're rotating in a positive way to be full strength for this game against the Revs compared to Montreal, who put out basically a full team lineup, full first team lineup almost. And the Revs, on the other hand, it's their second straight road game. They went to Charlotte, have to come up to Toronto. And both these defenses have shown some really good, sequences, especially in the last 5 weeks. As you could see by these score lines, most of their games have been decided by 1 goal or been draws, and they've all been very low scoring. And I think the line for this game from the betting perspective for the over-under is spot on because it's 2.25, so it's between that 2.5, and it's hard to argue with that. It's hard to really see, many goals in this one because of the attitude these teams have and just how much they've struggled in attack. Also paired with the fact that even though Toronto is probably going to be full strength for this one, regardless of that midweek match, they still have a couple of first-team players playing midweek, and so, that extra game, is definitely a factor in terms of the energy they might have in this game, and it just might be a little slower paced with not a lot of, back and forth attacks. And it's hard not to favor the Revs, though, anyways, in this one, even though Toronto is the home team, just because of their form. They've been pulling out these results. They have, I would say, the best player on the pitch, honestly, at the moment in terms of form and just talent. You could definitely argue that with comparing that with Insigne or Bernadeschi, but Bernadeschi actually sat this midweek game out. I'm not actually sure if it's for an injury or not, but we'll see about his status coming into this one. But yeah, I think Carles Hill at the moment is the best player on the pitch between these two teams in terms of just form as well, specifically, and he's been carrying this team to some much needed results after a very, very bad first 5 weeks. And so I think this one could definitely end in something like a 1-1 draw or something along those lines, but I think New England has the better attacking potential in this one and can definitely steal all 3 points. I'm going to say they win this one 2-0. Moving on, it's another Eastern matchup with 2 heavyweights. This time around, it's the Crew hosting Charlotte. Both these teams having different weeks in Week 10. The Crew got back to winning ways against San Jose in a bit of a closer game than they would have liked and probably should have been. And also Charlotte losing for the first time at home in what seems like forever and for the first time this season against New England. And we know about Charlotte on the road. They have just 1 road win this season. That was at Montreal. It was a 1-0 win. Other than that, they've picked up, I think, 2 losses and a draw in their other 3 road games. And once again, this is just a team that we haven't really seen it from on the road in terms of the same patterns of play, the same efficiency, and just being these killers in terms of that attack. And it's hard to favor them in this one. The Crew are obviously favored at home under Nancy. They're basically fully healthy, still waiting on, I believe, Camacho as the only one, but he's been out for the whole start of this season. and they've been doing swimmingly without him on that back line. And like I said, I think the Crew are rightly favored here, but in terms of the tactically, I think this lines up a little bit better for Charlotte. I think Charlotte has given the Crew a bit of some fits. I think they actually won a game there last season, if I'm not mistaken. And the problem with when they faced the Revs is that the Revs were giving up the possession. They were fully letting Charlotte dictate the play and having to break them down. But in this one, it's going to probably be the Crew that have a lot of the ball. You know, Nancy system. There's a lot of these patterns and sequences of passing. And the Crew are kind of known, or at least in my opinion, I feel like they, in these types of games, give up some crucial mistakes, some crucial giveaways. They aren't fully mentally locked in at times. Just at times that you see these kind of moments. You've seen it against Miami. You've seen it against NYCFC in some tournament games and such like that. And Charlotte is that kind of team where I think this can suit them, even though the opponent is much better than who they just played. It tactically, I think Charlotte will have chances in this one just because they'd rather get out in transition a little bit and have that freedom and have Pep Biel or whoever kind of play these balls in behind. And that's kind of one of the Crew's weaknesses, is that they do maybe tend to have some slips in terms of some bad giveaways. But the Crew should be favored here. They're fully healthy, like I said. And I'm not going to really say that anything separates these two. I think a draw is a pretty fair result, considering Charlotte's just inability to really get any type of wins against good opposition on the road. And the Crew, they only have one loss on the season. I don't think Charlotte on the road is going to hand them their second loss. I see the points being shared in this one. I'm going to say 1-1. Next up, it's a cross-conference battle between DC United and the Rapids. And this is going to be our first best bet of the show. I'm on the Rapids plus 0.5, so Rapids to draw or win, the double chance, as it's also called, at minus 115. And DC United still not really being transparent about Benteke's status after getting injured in that Red Bulls game. He didn't play against the Union. It seems like it's going to keep him out for at least this game again, and then probably a little while more than they would obviously like. And also the replacement and one of the other kind of dual strikers that has been playing for them, DC Baji, seemed to get injured in that last game against the Union. And it doesn't really matter whether they're home or away. This DC United side is absolutely terrible defensively. And as for the Rapids, they aren't all that much better defensively by the metrics, I guess, because both these teams are 9th and 8th in worst in terms of expected goals allowed so far. But the Rapids, to get a draw in this one, I think is a pretty fair price. And they do have to travel, all the way to East Coast. That's obviously a factor in this one. But DC United just doesn't have that bite from an attacking perspective without Benteke. They've been slipping in terms of those metrics and those numbers. Obviously, of course, since he's been injured, and the Rapids are still just above like middle of the pack in terms of their output right now in terms of expected goals. And they've, it's been very hard to beat them. Their only loss past 5 is against Vancouver on the road. The Rapids really aren't a team usually, at least so far this season, that have been able to produce a lot of possession. And that has hurt them in instances against a team like the Whitecaps that are obviously absolutely lethal at holding possession and just dictating the game. But in this one, I think the Rapids should have a lot more of the ball. And they have the players to really hurt this DC United side, who once again is just, even on the eye test as well, is just terrible defensively. And it's just hard not to fade this DC team week in, week out, because this squad is truly just, there are not many very quality players in the squad. And you take out Benteke, who is a huge source of those goals. No one expected that win against Red Bulls a couple weeks back. I was against them then. But that was more so Red Bulls having some defensive problems and Red Bulls kind of being Red Bulls, and one of those goals being a disgusting overhead kick. by Pirani. But yeah, as for the Rapids, they're fully healthy here. Zach Steffen's back from his red card, and they were still able to earn a draw against Seattle at home. And so they've just been very hard to beat for the most part, and they do have also been tending to get some draws here and there when maybe they should also win. So I think, not wanting to get greedy here, this is a fantastic price, I think, for a far superior team. There probably should be goals in this one on both sides a little bit, but I fully trust the Rapids to probably get around 2 at least here and, just continue to put DC out of its misery. Moving on, it's Miami hosting the New York Red Bulls. Miami finally suffered its first loss of the season against Dallas, completely collapsing, up 3-1 at home. But they also did rotate heavily for that match in preparation for today's, at the time of recording currently, second leg against the Whitecaps, like we mentioned. And, regardless of the result, they have that extra game in hand, an extra couple of games, if you include that first leg, in the past 2 weeks or week and a half that they have to deal with and rotate for. And so they're putting all their eggs in that basket at the moment. And so it's hard to kind of trust them from a lineup standpoint in terms of what to expect and a bit of load management, especially for the obvious stars and the main guys there. As for the Red Bulls, got back on track in a sense because they beat Montreal, but who really hasn't this season because Montreal's still winless. It was a corner goal scored by Ale, and yeah, I mean, they got the job done, but that's just kind of what the Red Bulls do. Like, you don't really fully have faith in them to put in a, full performance, but against some weaker Eastern teams, they'll probably find a moment or two. And, defensively, they should be solid, but at the same time, they're also now going to be missing Dylan Nealis for a couple of months, and they've obviously been dealing with Morales, been out for basically this whole season to start, and so both their wingback situation is kind of uncertain at the moment, and the defense just hasn't been, in my opinion, really holding up its end of the bargain. Edelman might be coming back in that midfield. Lewis Morgan, we don't know, how close he is. He should be, I feel like, based on what the original report was in terms of how long his injury would have kept him out. He should be kind of working his way back now, but no real update on that. And I think this is like a dead rubber game, or just one that it's almost impossible to predict because you don't know what lineup Miami's going to put out. And the Red Bulls, from an attacking standpoint, just haven't been consistent. And this is one that I'm really honestly uninterested in completely from a viewing standpoint, everything along those lines, because you just expect Miami to rest their players. They should have probably won, they had the chance to still get that result against Dallas. But, these are these types of situations where, they can afford a loss or a draw because, like, whatever. Yeah, maybe it looks bad that week, but, like, they're still going to be challenging for Supporter Shield at the end of the day. So this is just one of those weeks where, yeah, like, Miami should win. Probably they have the talent, but like it's impossible to really predict their lineup and their energy levels. And so Red Bulls definitely have a chance to steal a point in this one, but I'm still going to pick Miami to get it done because of Red Bulls' just inability to really convince me from an attacking standpoint. So I'm going to go 2-1 for Miami. Next up, it's another Eastern matchup with two completely different sides of the table in this one. Montreal hosting Philly. And I'm not going to lie, as I've been recording this video, those midweek games have been going on, and Montreal did just knock off Toronto in penalties after coming back twice in that game. It was a 2-2 final score, and then it went straight to penalties in that Canadian Championship. Montreal won on penalties, with Sirois making a couple of big saves. And I have no idea why he didn't start in the last game. I think it actually was probably in preparation for this midweek game instead of some kind of slight at him, like as if he's not their first choice goalkeeper or something like that, because he certainly is and has looked fantastic for them this season. But so Montreal is into that second round. Toronto knocked out in the first round is insane work. But that was kind of the luck and unluck of the draw since they matched up in the first round. But regardless, Montreal has that midweek game they had to deal with. They played basically a 50-50 lineup in terms of their actual starters and second choice players. Or sorry, that's completely wrong. That was Toronto's end. Montreal actually played a full lineup essentially in terms of who would be first choice. And Vrioni finally, one of his few appearances this season, came off the bench and scored that equalizer, a beautiful scissor kick to make it 2-2 very, very late. So that's a great sign for Montreal because, just for him to finally get off the mark, and hopefully for them, he needs to stay healthy. But, that was only a limited appearance, and will he be ready to actually get a full start in this one? We'll have to see. I don't know yet because of just how poorly his injury situation and history has been kind of going. So they might want to be cautious with him, but we'll see. Maybe that the goal definitely puts him in contention for a start, just that performance alone, but it's about his fitness, and we're kind of unsure about that. But to get into this one, our second best bet is the under 2.5 at -110. This is a completely 50-50 line, one of the few this week, I feel like, in terms of the total at a straight 2.5. And I'm going with the under in this one. Montreal, like we said, a lot of this first team play that midweek. They're going to have a bit of tired legs. And yes, they did win this match midweek. So obviously that's motivation. They're in good spirits. Like they needed that because they literally haven't won an actual MLS match yet. So that's a good actual first win of the season in all competitions for them. But both these teams are actually in the top 7 in terms of expected goals allowed, and they're not allowing much. Montreal, obviously, despite not winning a single MLS game, has made it very difficult for teams. And as you can see, even especially in the last 5 matches, it's been very hard for goals to come by. Even in their losses, it's been 1-0s. They haven't really been holding up their end of the bargain for the most part, and both teams to score has really not been hitting at a high rate. So for this one to go over, it's really going to come down to, will it be a 2-1 result for either side? Will there be a lot of chances on both ends? And I just don't see it playing out that way because even though Montreal is in those higher spirits and a little more motivated, and them being at home following that win, they're going to be a little bit more tired. Philly as well, getting Lukic back from that red card from last game. Bueno should be good to go again in this one. And they're basically fully healthy, Philly is. And, both these teams being fully healthy are 2 pretty good defenses so far this season. And I just don't think it's going to be a game played in a lot of transition for the most part. Philly has kept a clean sheet in 3 of its last 4 games, including the last 2 wins. So really, I really only see this going over, if one team kind of carries the load. Like Philly has only gone over because they've gotten both these 3-0 wins, and Montreal, even in bad results, hasn't really been completely dominated in terms of that score sheet. So I don't see that turning around in this one, and the extra fact that they played a full lineup midweek. I think this is one that can get scrappy, and this ends something around what I think a 1-1 game or a 2-0 Union win. But at the same time, yeah, I just don't see fireworks in this one. But it could go either way. That could be an extra boost for Montreal since they did win that match. And maybe if Vrioni is fit, that could change things in terms of that attacking output, because I think he's definitely an upgrade on Owusu, who outside of really the first week against Atlanta has not looked that good. We move over to the West, where it's Austin hosting Minnesota. It's 3rd versus 4th in the West. But both these teams coming off losses in Week 10. Austin losing to one of their rivals, Houston, and the Whitecaps beating Minnesota in a convincing fashion, while also dealing with, obviously, the Champions Cup congestion. But I think that's only Minnesota's 2nd loss of the season, including the Week 1 loss to LAFC that was 1-0. So it's been a team that's been very hard to beat because of their tactical structure. And at the same time, Austin hasn't been easy to beat as well. Obviously, you see them 3rd and 4th in the standings. That's not like, an insane statement. But just to say that Both these defenses have been pretty good, and neither really loves to dictate the game in terms of possession. These are two teams with some of the lowest possession rates, and the problem for Austin is that they lost Danny Pereira early in that match, one of their key midfielders, I would have to say, and it's going to be interesting to see. It doesn't seem like he's probably trending to actually return already in this match. And you also have Brandon Vasquez, who should be coming back because he was a late scratch against Houston due to an illness. And, that shouldn't really keep someone out more than, this extra week as well. Like, he should be good to go, all things considered. And for Minnesota, it's basically a fully healthy lineup. And I just think Minnesota will bounce back from that loss and at least get a draw in this one. Austin's attack, especially without Pereira, and that midfield as well, just doesn't really generate enough. And with Vasquez's uncertainty, even though he should be coming back, I'm going to give the edge to Minnesota in this one. It's going to be an interesting game to watch because one team's going to have to probably take control a little bit, or it's just going to be this back and forth, random mess of a game that could sneakily have a lot of chances just depending on how they come out and play. But it's one that's a little bit hard to read. But I think Pereira is a key injury for this Austin side. So I'm going to say Minnesota probably should be a little bit more favored to get the 3 points in this one. And I'm going to say Minnesota gets it done with a 1-0 win. Going back to the East now, where it's the Fire hosting Orlando City. And there's no two ways to put it. The Fire got absolutely beat down last week for one of their most embarrassing results in their history. 7-2 to Nashville. Meanwhile, Orlando finally ended a run of 3 straight scoreless games, beating Atlanta 3-0, so a much-needed result. And I don't think it's a coincidence that Atuesta coming back after missing those 3 games alongside Araujo, who missed those 3 games. Araujo didn't come back, but just Atuesta coming back meant that there was just that little bit more of quality in that midfield in terms of getting balls forward and things of that nature. And so Orlando, it seems like Araujo could also be coming back because he missed the past couple of weeks due to I think it was an ankle injury or something like that. But then last week he was a scratch because his wife had a baby. They had a baby. And so, I don't know really how long those things, I guess, would normally take, but it's not like an injury. And so unless he's going to be on leave for another week or something like that, then could be back for this one, I would expect. But at least Atuesta is back, so that's a big boost for that midfield. Meanwhile, for the Fire, I mean, they've been running this risk all season. They've only held the 1 clean sheet, but only been kept off the score sheet once, and that was in that 0-0 draw. So all their games have been high scoring for the most part, and mostly back and forth outside of that Nashville game that was over in about 20 minutes. But Tehran is injured. He's out for indefinitely, one of their main center backs. So it's going to be, one of the younger guys paired alongside Jack Elliott. And then Barroso still doesn't seem to be on his way back. But from an attacking standpoint, they're basically fully healthy there. So this team should be competing still, but definitely are going to want to clean it up defensively. Even though Berhalter is probably going to be stubborn and keep this way of playing, a result like that can really just make you kind of focus on the kind of fundamentals in that sense of the defensive side of the ball, and maybe they play a little less riskier, and make sure that they don't go out to such a bad start as last game. But I think it's hard to deny that, and not state the fact that the Fire have still not won a home game yet. I think they played 4 home games out of the 10 matches so far, and they have not won a single one. Meanwhile, Orlando has just been hard to beat recently, and Montreal has been a fantastic player this season, and with Atuesta back as well, even though they have they had some defensive problems early, 4 straight clean sheets, and Galese has really turned his own form around. But I think the Fire will still get their chances. I think Orlando's clean sheet run ends, but I'm going to take a draw in this one. I'm going to say something around a 2-2 result. I I think that's a pretty fair result for these teams. And unfortunately, the Fire's streak of still not winning at home, I think, continues. In this one, it's San Diego hosting Dallas, and San Diego has now lost 3 in a row. Meanwhile, Dallas on the road so far this season is a perfect 5 for 5 in terms of, sorry, not perfect, but undefeated, and coming off that unbelievable comeback win against Miami to win 4-3. But they do have to travel very, very far, and they have been in the past couple of weeks. Obviously, this is going to be their 3rd straight road match, going to Minnesota, going to the East Coast of Miami, now all the way to the West Coast. That's a big ask of any MLS team in terms of, pulling out such good results week in, week out. But it is a possibility against the San Diego team that has obviously kind of fallen off a little bit in terms of their defensive structure and just letting in goals, because they've let in 3 in all 3 of their last losses, and it seems like they just haven't been able to cope with some of the pressing against these teams, specifically last week against RSL, where we had them with the 2-unit. It seemed like they were just laboring in terms of keeping the ball, and RSL was causing them some problems. But there were chances on both ends. It's just been kind of back and forth with San Diego recently, and they are pretty much healthy outside of Ingvartsen. So we'll see if Andres Reyes starts here after that red card that he was suspended for against RSL. And I think San Diego will turn it around again. I know I said that last week, but I think that travel is going to be pretty important aspect of this game, and Dallas could be a little bit tired on that side of things. I'm gonna say that San Diego gets this one done 2-1. We're staying in the West for these last several games of Saturday's slate, and in this one, it's the Whitecaps hosting RSL. And Whitecaps, as we know, are playing that second leg against Miami. And as I've been recording this, like I mentioned in the Montreal game, Montreal won their midweek game as it was going on. And at the same time, that second leg is going on between the Whitecaps and Miami in Miami. And I think it's safe to say the Whitecaps are going to the Champions Cup final because they're up 3-1 in that second leg at Miami in the 75th minute. And that means they're up 5-1 on aggregate. So Miami will have to score 5 goals because of the away goals as well to win and overturn that tie in 15 minutes. That's not happening. And just, it's unbelievable out of the Whitecaps. They're an unbelievable team this season. They're so motivated. That midfield continues to put in goals and assists. Berhalter with 2 assists and a goal. Vite with a goal. Brian White with a goal at the time of this recording, 75th minute in that second leg. Unbelievable. And they're going to face either Cruz Azul or Tigres in the final. And it's just an unbelievable achievement for this club that has so much other drama off the field as well going on with it. But regardless, to focus on this game, Whitecaps have had those extra games in hand, but it just really hasn't mattered, has it? Because last week after that first leg against Miami, they went to Minnesota, and it took them until the second half to really get things going. But some great goals, a great link-up play, and completely outplayed Minnesota in that one. And then they have to travel to Miami, and they're going to have to travel all the way back home, which is the longest trip in MLS, to prepare for this one on 2 days rest. And honestly, I'm kind of done using that as a reason and using at this kind of extra load management in terms of the games the Whitecaps have been playing as an excuse, or they're not used to it because they haven't gone far in these tournaments. But it seems like it doesn't matter. They're just defying all logic and historical trends in terms of their continued great form. They're getting results in both competitions, and it really hasn't looked close in terms of those results and their performances. So, I mean, I'm going to favor them in this one. They should be favored. It doesn't even matter about the rest. Even though RSL put in a great performance last week at San Diego, and Diego Luna, got 2 goals in that one, including a banger and a penalty. Like, this team is head and shoulders above, especially this entire Western Conference right now. That seems to just be really, really, I don't want to say weak, but just very unsure of itself, and no one else is really standing out, besides maybe Minnesota, who they just beat, who I think was second before they just matched up, and now they've slipped to fourth because of that loss. And so no one in the West right now can really match the Whitecaps level. And even if they rotate, Sorensen just has this team playing completely head and shoulders above the rest of the West. And so I'm going to favor the Whitecaps. I'm going to go with a 3-1 victory against RSL. I think Diego Luna's performances, despite the fact that they are becoming a little bit more of a trend, and that's a great positive for him, and hopefully he can eventually take his talents to a different league, I still don't think that we're going to see this every single week out of RSL, because that would just be a Herculean effort, and that would have to take a literal like MVP level out of Luna to make this team very relevant, even though it is a weak West. So I don't think that same performance can be put up against this Whitecaps team, and I'm going to say the Whitecaps get this one done 3-1. Next up, it's LAFC hosting the Dynamo, and the third best bet here, I'm going with LAFC to win the match on the money line and over 1.5 goals. Their money line is pretty juiced, and you just combine that, the fact that I think they get 2 goals themselves anyways, and it gets you at this great price of -105. We did the same with Cincinnati last week, and it basically was needed because they ended up winning 2-1. But that just an example, a type of kind of bet that you can pair if unless you think this is a 1-0 result, which is, I guess, entirely possible given the history of these two teams. There haven't been many goals in their past, just head-to-head matchups, which shouldn't be the end-all be-all of like really anything you want to bet, but that is still a statistic. These games have been a little bit lower scoring between these two teams. The Dynamo, historically, especially in the past couple of years, have been a little bit better defensively, but this season they've kind of, fallen down on all levels. But they did just win against Austin 2-0. I think, we were on Austin to get at least a draw in that one from a betting perspective. And, it didn't take the Dynamo until very late to figure that Austin team out, and Austin kind of shot itself in the foot, in my opinion, with, obviously, we didn't know Brandon Vasquez was going to be ruled out with an illness late, and the fact that Pereira got injured, one of their best midfielders, very early on in that match. That changed the whole complexion of the match, and eventually the Dynamo's new signing, Linger, got a goal again. It's now 2 goals in 2 games and appearances for Linger, and he's looking the real deal for this team. He's definitely raising the attacking level of this team. Ponce also getting that second goal. But for LAFC, I think this is a great spot for them to bounce back. They've had a couple of, draws recently on the higher scoring end, and I think this is one that at home against this Dynamo side, they're also looking for revenge, because they gave the Dynamo their first win of the season out of the only 2 they have now, when they visited the Dynamo only a month ago or so, while they were dealing with congestion in the Champions Cup quarterfinal with Miami. And so that was a rotated kind of squad a little bit for LAFC, and that was kind of I think a throwaway game for LAFC, and doesn't really mean much in terms of the actual quality between these two teams. But LAFC is fully healthy now. Bawanga, you can see in the past couple of weeks, is really finally getting into form and getting on the score sheet. He should have, I guess, maybe not should have, but he could have had a hat trick, but missed the penalty, had the 2 goals in that draw. And, Lloris makes boneheaded plays sometimes. That's unfortunately the risk, I guess, anyone runs when we take LAFC with him in net, because there's already been a couple of instances against San Diego and last week against St. Louis where on these set pieces he is just completely lost and mistimes his clearances and punches of the ball in the air, and it leads to a scramble and it leads to a goal for the other team. And so that's part of why they drew last week. But I think LAFC is the superior team. Houston's defense has been pretty poor. And Their attacking level, like I said, does raise with Linger, and he did start last game, so he should be a obviously common feature as that new signing. But I think LAFC fully healthy at home has been long overdue for a pretty good performance, and I just think they're head and shoulders above the Dynamo, who still have kind of made life hard for some teams on the road with a couple of 0-0 draws early, and are only suffered one loss in the last 5, but I think things turn around for this LAFC side, who is getting back to health, and the quality shows for this team. And I'm pairing it with the over 1.5. I think even if they concede, LAFC should have no problem just getting 2 themselves anyways. And I think they honestly run away with this one, something like 2-0 or 3-0. Moving on, it's the Earthquakes and the Timbers. And the Timbers, one of the hottest teams in the West, and I'm trusting them here in this one to continue that form, especially from an attacking perspective. And for our 4th best bet, it's going to be a 2-unit play, and I'm going with the Timbers team total over 1.5. This is an unbelievable price in my opinion, plus 120 for this Timbers team to score 2 goals in a game that has one of the highest totals anyways of an MLS match this season at around 3.25 already. And so the line is expecting goals, and there's going to be goals on both ends for sure. It's hard to expect either of these teams to really hold a clean sheet. Portland looked like they were going to run away with that and a clean sheet last game, but then eventually almost let it made things a little interesting against the Galaxy. Went up 3-0, and then it was 3-2 before they won 4-2 on a penalty. But the Timbers attack has just been fully clicking. Jonathan Rodriguez has been back. Maybe he actually finally gets his first start of the season in this one. And in transition, they are absolutely elite. They're absolutely fully in sync. They have so much pace. And maybe the numbers haven't backed that up this season so far. They're actually not really even in the top half of the expected goals numbers. But with the way San Jose plays at the same time, I really don't think that matters. I don't think they're due for negative regression or anything like that in this game, because San Jose still is just one of those super entertaining teams, because they just play super back and forth. As you can see from these score lines, it's just always these high scoring games with both teams scoring lots of goals. And I just don't think that's going to change. And they're also potentially getting Hernan Lopez back, the Earthquakes, after a month or even longer out. And so we'll see if he features in some way. But while there should be goals on both ends, and taking the total, for the game, is a fine bet in my opinion as well. I think the Earthquakes defense is far worse. And especially if the Timbers get out to a lead, that's when they really kill you. And they have played a couple of road games recently, but they played against LAFC at home. They went to the Galaxy and out Earthquakes. That these are not really true travel, and it's so close. They're a state away. This isn't like anything crazy, even though it is a back-to-back road game, right? And yeah, I just think it's a fantastic price against a team that statistically is the worst defense and from an expected goals allowed output, and also a great offense, best in expected goals. So there should be fireworks on both ends, but Portland is clearly the better team and has the much more solid defense. So they probably should win, honestly, but it's probably going to be a high-scoring game. Just look at their score lines. They're fully healthy, and I'm fully backing this Timbers attack to get the job done. And I'm not going to worry about the defensive side of the ball because, why would you? Their money line price, I think, is like, they're not favored, I don't think, but it doesn't matter. The Earthquakes games are like this, and yeah, this is a fantastic price, I think, with one of the hottest teams in the league. Basically, the Earthquakes, it doesn't matter whether they're home or away. That's just how their games have gone. To cap off Saturday's night slate, it's the Sounders hosting St. Louis. These teams already played in St. Louis this season, with St. Louis winning 1-0 on, I believe it was a Lewin free kick that was the decider in a pretty not so entertaining game, and that's kind of been the case for St. Louis in a lot of their games this season. They did get a draw at LAFC last week, but I would say that was more so LAFC shooting themselves in the foot than anything else, because of, like I mentioned, that your Reese blunder. And there's just so many question marks with this lineup because Lewin's been out for personal reasons. Berkey obviously has been out for like a month. And then you also have one of their center backs, I believe, and just other players scattered around this lineup that are either training on the side, and this midfield is just a mess. You can't trust this midfield to really hold possession. And the Sounders kind of love that. They love having the ball. But they're also dealing with injuries right now with Jordan Morris. It seems like he got re-injured and is going to do an MRI. And so I don't think he shouldn't be playing in this one. Also, Jesus Ferreira, he has been playing, but he was training on the side this week, at least so far. I don't think it's anything that would keep him out or per se, but you also have Jackson Reagan out on that back line for still a decent amount of weeks going forward. And it's just very, very hard to trust this Sounders team, I feel like. They have put in better results recently, including back-to-back wins before getting that draw at Colorado, in which they did lead, but then conceded on a free kick. But I think with St. Louis's situation, they just really don't offer much for me. And this is going to be one where they probably just try to escape with another draw because I just don't think they have the pace to frustrate the Sounders in behind because they're not going to have a lot of the ball. So they're really just going to pack it in, play tight. And this should be a low-scoring game, I feel like. But the Sounders have been a little bit unpredictable from that end. Even against Nashville, it was 3-0 against what is now looking like a very good Nashville team. So I think the Sounders get their revenge with a similar scoreline. I'm going to say 1-0 to Seattle. We're now on to Sunday slate, which is only just 2 matches compared to 4 last week. The first one being an Eastern matchup. It's NYCFC hosting Cincinnati. Cincinnati, undoubtedly the hottest team in MLS. 5 straight wins now after a Kevin Denke masterclass with what has to be the goal of the season so far, that beautiful overhead bicycle kick, whatever you want to call it, to eventually, that was actually the game-winning goal because Kansas City got one back late. But Kevin Denke seems like he's finally going to be fully firing for the Cincy squad. And meanwhile, NYCFC did turn things around, beating Toronto through a penalty last week, 1-0. And they host this one at Citi Field, actually. So that's my bad. I should have edited the graphic. This is not at Yankee Stadium. It's at Citi Field. But regardless, baseball field, all that, yada, yada, yada. We know it's going to be a little bit more narrower. But Cincinnati actually is finally had its entire full roster training this week, with Kubo finally back from an injury he's been dealing with for about 2 weeks or so. And then Hadebe, one of their main signings from the end of last season, finally training now. And he's likely going to be an option for that back line. But regardless, that back line outside of him is all fully healthy. And it seems like, I do trust this Cincy defense when fully healthy. And it was honestly a banger that Kansas City scored really late last week. But outside of that, those things happen. It's a little bit unlucky from an under perspective. But regardless, before that, I personally trust the Cincinnati defense. And this team is just fully clicking right now. They've been getting these wins, right? But some of them have been and they've all been 1-goal results. So some of them have been a little bit on the lower scoring end, those 2-1-0s. And NYCFC, I think they're a pretty average side, or maybe even towards the better side of MLS defenses. And being at home, they just simply seem to up that level in terms of that intensity and physicality. And so here I'm going with the best bet, number 5. It's the under 2.5. We're getting at what I think is a good price, plus 105 for this under. And I will say that I think it's 3 out of the 4 NYCFC home games so far have gone over. But I don't think that's been really due to, tremendous play from them or in those games. I think some of those have been real 50-50s, and it's literally hit by the hook or not in terms of getting that third goal or staying at 2. And yeah, this NYCFC team, I just don't really see the path outside of, Maxi Morales or Martinez really carrying them, because they still, like I said and have said previously, you're not going to have a lot of really great scoring outputs when you only have one DP on the field, especially from an attacking perspective. And Cincinnati going on the road here, I just think this will be a pretty physical game. Cincinnati shouldn't be allowing many chances. And I think this is one that NYCFC can frustrate Cincinnati and kind of stop this winning streak. I do probably favor Cincinnati a little bit. Of course, they're the far better team and they're fully healthy. But in this environment, right, and all that, I think this one gets here. I think it's a good price to take it at. I just don't see this one being a shootout. And NYCFC, once again, just doesn't really move me. But at the same time, I kind of do respect their defense a little bit. And at home, and Cincinnati going on the road in this environment, it should just be a little tougher for them to score. I mean, yes, they did win last week, and we also took them last week. But it also took some really, it took that Denke amazing goal to actually get that over the line. And you could call that luck or not in terms of the bet hitting specifically. But obviously that was a fantastic goal. It takes a lot of skill. But I'm just saying in that aspect of it, yes, Cincinnati's been clicking in terms of the results. But still, I think there's still this level they have to reach. And this is an NYCFC defense that I think can just make things frustrating in general. So I think at the price as well, it's a good bet. I mean, faded or not, whatever you like. These are just my picks, and yeah, that's where I'm going with this one. I see this one ending something like 1-1. To wrap everything up, it's Sunday night soccer. And it's the two worst teams in the West. Wow, what a display for MLS on its primetime slate. But no, jokes aside, I think this will be a pretty good game from an entertainment perspective, actually. Despite the fact these two teams are obviously the two dead last in their conference. They're both fully healthy. They're both trending fully healthy. The Galaxy have finally recovered from some injuries that they've been dealing with to start the season. Paintsel has gotten several games now with full health, and they finally have that dual wing, threat with him and Peck. Christian Ramirez has been bagging goals kind of as of late. He scored in that attempted comeback against Portland. And Kansas City has been pretty healthy. It's just that, they're not a really great team. So the quality is not always there, of course. But they're also potentially getting a couple of players back on their back line with Rosero and Davis. But here we're going with the over 3 as the final best bet, and it's at plus 105. I was debating between over 3 or both to score and over 2.5. But like I kind of did a little bit last week, I don't really want to get too cute because we've seen from Kansas City as well where it could be a 3-0 on either end. And I do think this is one that LA Galaxy have marked on their schedule in terms of finally getting this first win of the season, because they have still not won in MLS. I think they won the only match they've won in all competitions was early on in Champions Cup in one of the legs of those 2-leg ties at home. But outside of that, still just can't get a win. And their schedule after this game is really, really rough against some pretty good teams. And so we're 10 games in. Greg Vanney, while he does get grace because he won MLS Cup and all these injuries and stuff Galaxy have been dealing with, you can't just go winless for almost, if we get into 20 games and it's crazy to think about, but we're already 10 games in. So if you get that late, it's kind of unforgivable no matter what situation you're dealing with. You have to pull out some wins. Even the Dynamo or whatever, Kansas City have gotten wins against, yes, poor teams. So this is a situation where Galaxy, it's a very poor team. This is the only other team above you in the conference. So I think the Galaxy are going to put in a performance. Defensively, though, as we know, both these teams are absolutely horrid. So I think that will cancel out maybe some attacking kind of, neither of these attacks, specifically Kansas City, being really even good per se, because both these teams are bottom 7 in terms of expected goals production so far this season, but they're also bottom 7 and in terms of expected goals allowed. So both these defenses have been very, very poor, but the Galaxy specifically have been definitely contributing a little bit more from an attacking output with Paintsel back. That front 3, Ramirez, Paintsel, Peck. And then their midfield now with Royce coming back from a bit of a knock. Maybe he starts in this one after not starting last game. So I think this is one that maybe the Galaxy could run away with a little bit. It's not like KC at home is invincible or anything. I mean, they got completely smoked by Portland. And, a couple of their games recently have just been some pretty, nasty scorelines. And so one way or the other. So I think this is a good price. I think this at least pushes. I do expect both to score anyways, but I just, in terms of the bet, I mean, I'm not going to try to get cute here. I think the Galaxy get this one done. I think they finally get their first one of the season because, I mean, who else are they really going to get it against in the coming weeks when you look at their schedule? But I see chances on both ends of this one. The weather should be completely fine. And I think we close out the weekend on Sunday Night Soccer with another great game for goals. So I'm going to say Galaxy get this one across the line 3-1. Thanks for tuning in once again, everyone. Let me know what matchups you're looking forward to the most in Week 11. I think we're going to learn a lot more about these teams. There's a lot of good matchups between some top teams in their respective conferences. So, like I said, we'll learn a little bit more about these teams and where they stand. And once again, like the video down below, subscribe to the channel if you haven't, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Enjoy the weekend's matches, everyone.